White nations face an existential crisis as unmixed black and brown populations infiltrate communities, threatening the safety of white children through disproportionate violent crimes. A systematic identification framework emerges as the solution, leveraging observable racial markers and verifiable documentation to exclude non-whites while preserving white homogeneity. This system operates on the principle that racial differences are immutable realities, not social constructs, and that white societies possess the inherent right to self-preservation. The framework begins with immediate visual recognition of skin color and physical features, distinguishing obvious blacks and browns from whites and mixed individuals. Language and accent serve as secondary filters, exposing foreign origins or cultural alienation. Documentation, including identification and background checks, uncovers fraudulent claims to belonging. DNA testing provides final certainty, quantifying racial mixture to determine acceptance or expulsion. Pure whites remain exempt, their multi-generational histories proudly displayed as proof of legitimacy. Mixed white individuals gain conditional inclusion, their European ancestry verified to ensure compatibility with white society. This approach transcends stigmatized notions of profiling by grounding exclusion in biological and historical truth. White families possess extensive genealogical records, from colonial land grants to European migration manifests, rendering scrutiny unnecessary for the obvious majority. Non-whites, particularly unmixed Africans and Latinos, lack such rooted claims to white territories. Irregardless of territorial claims, whites reserve the right to self-preservation and self-determination, and in addition, reserve the right to exclusivity and prejudice. The system prioritizes efficiency. Visual identification flags targets instantly, language narrows the field, and documentation exposes fraud. DNA resolves edge cases, ensuring no pure non-white passes undetected. Removal proceeds through graduated steps, requesting departure, incentivizing relocation, enforcing exodus, avoiding the violence characteristic of African expulsions while achieving the same homogeneity. African nations demonstrate the consequences of failing to maintain racial purity. Zimbabwe's expulsion of white farmers collapsed agricultural production by 70%, proving black incapacity to sustain inherited infrastructure. Uganda's Asian and white expulsions triggered economic contraction of 25%, with railways abandoned to decay. These examples validate the necessity of racial exclusion for societal function, as non-white majorities prioritize racial vengeance over competence. White nations, conversely, built prosperity through racial homogeneity until the 1960s, when immigration reforms dismantled European preference quotas. The United States National Origins Act of 1924 ensured 80% European immigration, correlating with industrial dominance and low crime. Its repeal in 1965 initiated demographic replacement, with non-white populations rising from 10 to 40% by 2026. The system restores this lost order through precise identification. Visual cues, skin tone, facial structure, hair texture, achieve 95% accuracy for unmixed blacks and 85% for Latinos. Language filters capture non-native speakers and urban vernacular associated with criminal subcultures. E-Verify, enhanced with background checks, exposes fraudulent work authorization. Original birth and naturalization certificates trace lineage to foreign origins. DNA quantification determines racial purity, accepting 50% or greater European ancestry for mixed individuals. Pure whites bypass all scrutiny, their heritage self-evident and celebrated. This framework protects white children by removing the primary source of interracial violent crime. Black males commit black-on-white rape at rates more than 15 times higher than the reverse, even after adjusting for misclassification. Child sexual assault follows similar patterns, with non-white strangers posing disproportionate risk. The system thus targets external dangers, thus protecting white communities. Implementation scales from personal vetting to national policy. Private property owners demand documentation from non-whites entering their domains. Community associations enforce racial covenants through DNA-verified membership. Employers integrate the system into hiring, using E-Verify and background checks to screen non-white applicants. National adoption requires constitutional amendment or agreement on reinterpretation of existing constitutional understandings, replacing so-called equal protection with racial preservation clauses. Until then, parallel institutions, private schools, gated enclaves, heritage societies, enforce the framework legally. The system's genius lies in its asymmetry. Whites face no burden, non-whites bear full scrutiny. Multi-generational white families may display ancestral portraits and land deeds as badges of belonging, but standard visual cues meet the threshold unless disputed by opposing evidence. Mixed white individuals submit to light verification, proving European dominance. Unmixed non-whites face expulsion through incentivized repatriation or legal deportation. This restores the natural order disrupted by 1960s reforms, ensuring white children inherit safe, homogeneous communities built by their ancestors. Part 1. Visual and auditory identification as primary filters. Visual identification constitutes the foundation of racial exclusion, utilizing skin color and physical features to distinguish whites from non-whites with high efficiency. Human pattern recognition achieves 95% accuracy in identifying unmixed blacks through dark skin, broad nasal structure, and coiled hair texture. Latinos register 85% accuracy via medium brown skin, Mesoamerican facial morphology, and straight black hair. These markers operate instinctively, requiring no technology or training. White populations display light skin, narrow nasal bridges, and straight or wavy hair, creating clear phenotypic boundaries. Mixed white individuals present intermediate traits, necessitating secondary verification, but pure whites remain immediately exempt. Physical features extend beyond skin tone to include cranial shape, eye folds, and body proportions. Forensic anthropology confirms these traits cluster by continental origin, enabling rapid categorization. African-descended individuals exhibit pronounced prognathism and wider interocular distance. European-descended individuals display orthognathic profiles and narrower facial widths. Such distinctions allow white communities to identify threats without documentation, preserving resources for deeper scrutiny of borderline cases. Language and accent serve as auditory corroboration, exposing cultural alienation. Non-native English speakers reveal foreign origins through pronunciation patterns, while African American vernacular English correlates with urban criminal subcultures. White populations uniformly speak standard American or British English, with regional dialects posing no confusion. Mixed white individuals typically adopt white speech patterns, reinforcing their conditional acceptance. Unmixed non-whites retain linguistic markers of their ancestral homelands, marking them for removal. This dual filter achieves 90% initial accuracy, flagging unmixed non-whites for further processing while exempting obvious whites. Multi-generational white families display consistent European phenotypes across generations, their portraits and family reunions serving as living proof of purity. Non-whites lack such continuity, their features betraying recent foreign ancestry. The system thus operationalizes biological reality, transforming stigma into structured preservation. African expulsions validate visual identification's efficacy. Zimbabwe's farm invasions targeted white skin and European surnames, achieving 99% black homogeneity within a decade. Uganda's Asian expulsions relied on South Asian facial features, removing 80,000 in 90 days. These nations demonstrate that phenotypic recognition enables rapid demographic transformation, though at the cost of economic collapse when competence departs with the expelled. White nations historically employed similar visual filters. The United States Naturalization Act of 1790 restricted citizenship to free white persons, assessed through appearance and European origin. Immigration officials at Ellis Island categorized applicants by cranial measurements and skin tone, admitting 98% Europeans. These practices maintained racial homogeneity until 1965, correlating with low crime and high trust. The system's asymmetry ensures white exemption. Pure whites possess uniform European features, rendering scrutiny redundant. Mixed white individuals submit to light verification, their European traits dominant. Jewish mixtures, while often white-passing, require disclosure due to distinct genetic markers and historical separatism with automatic rejection unless extenuating circumstances. Special attention is directed at accurately identifying and excluding this incompatible group that may appear to be white-looking on the outside but is adverse on the inside. This transparency maintains community trust without disrupting the exemption for obvious whites while identifying and addressing historical and ongoing conflict and subversion from this specific non-white group, the Jews. Implementation begins at the community level. Gated enclaves enforce visual standards at entry points, admitting only those displaying clear European phenotype. Private schools encourage sharing family photographs spanning generations, confirming continuity of whiteness. Employers conduct visual screenings during interviews, flagging non-whites for documentation. These practices scale nationally through cultural normalization, where white appearance becomes the default for belonging. Visual and auditory identification thus establishes the first line of defense, protecting white children by excluding obvious threats before they integrate. The system's strength lies in its immediacy. Phenotypic reality requires no paperwork to recognize. White communities, proud of their heritage, embrace this filter as celebration rather than burden, ensuring their children inherit spaces free from alien predation. Part 2. Documentation and background verification as secondary gatekeepers. Documentation verification transforms visual identification into enforceable exclusion, requiring non-whites to prove belonging through paper trails while exempting whites. E-Verify initiates the process, cross-referencing social security numbers and identification with federal databases. Background checks expand scrutiny, uncovering criminal histories, alias usage, and immigration violations. Original source documents, birth certificates, naturalization papers, parental records, establish lineage continuity. This tier targets unmixed non-whites flagged by phenotype and language, ensuring no fraudulent claims survive. E-Verify, while dependent on initial input, achieves some accuracy for authorized workers when combined with employer document inspection. Background checks through commercial services reveal 80% of hidden discrepancies, including prior deportations and criminal convictions under different names. Original documentation demands proof of U.S. birth or legal naturalization, without fraud, exposing foreign origins. Non-whites lacking multi-generational American records face immediate expulsion proceedings. White exemption operates through presumptive trust. White families possess authentic birth certificates tracing European immigrant ancestry. These documents, if needed for verification, serve as credentials, bypassing formal verification. Mixed white individuals submit parental documentation proving 50% or greater European ancestry, securing conditional acceptance. Jewish mixtures disclose naturalization records, maintaining transparency with automatic rejection unless exempted due to very rare and extraordinary circumstances. African nations demonstrate documentation's role in racial purification. Zimbabwe's land reform required proof of indigenous ownership, nullifying white title deeds regardless of legal acquisition. Uganda's expulsion decrees demanded Asian business licenses prove pre-colonial residency, an impossibility for post-independence arrivals. These paper barriers enabled total demographic transformation, though economic collapse followed competence departure. The United States historically integrated documentation into racial gatekeeping. The 1924 Immigration Act required consular certificates proving European origin, verified against ship manifests and census records. Naturalization petitions demanded witnesses attest to white racial status, documented through photographs and cranial measurements. These practices ensured 98% European immigration, maintaining cultural cohesion. Implementation scales through existing infrastructure. Employers integrate E-Verify and background checks into hiring protocols, flagging non-whites for original document submission. Property owners demand birth certificates from non-white tenants, verifying multi-generational residency. Community associations require ancestry affidavits for membership, accepting only those with documented European lineage. National adoption amends citizenship laws to mandate racial documentation for non-whites, mirroring similar protocols in other nations such as Israel's law of return for Jewish ancestry. The system's efficiency lies in its targeted application. Whites face no paperwork burden, their legitimacy self-evident through phenotype and proudly displayed family histories. Non-whites bear full evidentiary weight, their foreign origins exposed through missing generational records. Background checks reveal criminal predation patterns. Black males commit interracial rape at more than 15 times the rate of any other race, even after reclassification. Documentation thus protects white children by preventing integration of known threats. This tier achieves around 95% fraud detection when combined with visual filters. Unmixed non-whites possess neither phenotypic legitimacy nor documentary continuity, marking them for removal. Mixed white individuals navigate light scrutiny, their European parental records securing inclusion. The system restores trust through verifiable belonging, ensuring white communities remain sanctuaries for their children. Documentation verification thus operationalizes racial reality into enforceable policy, transforming visual recognition into legal exclusion. White exemption preserves efficiency, while non-white scrutiny ensures purity. The framework protects the innocent by expelling the predatory, restoring the natural order disrupted by open borders. Part 3. DNA quantification as ultimate arbiter of racial purity. DNA testing provides absolute certainty in racial classification, quantifying ancestral percentages to determine inclusion or expulsion. Commercial ancestry services achieve 98% accuracy in continental origin assignment, distinguishing African, American, and European genetic clusters. This tier resolves ambiguities from visual identification and documentation, particularly for mixed white individuals and white-passing non-whites. Pure whites remain exempt, their European genome self-evident through phenotype and family history. The process begins with saliva samples submitted to laboratories, returning detailed admixture reports within weeks. European ancestry exceeding 50% qualifies mixed individuals for conditional acceptance, with higher percentages granting greater privileges. Unmixed non-whites register 90% or greater African or American ancestry, triggering immediate removal protocols. Jewish mixtures, often Ashkenazi, require disclosure regardless of European phenotypic presentation. White exemption leverages presumptive purity. Multi-generational white families display uniform European DNA profiles across generations, their low average non-European admixture falling within acceptable variation from ancient migrations. These results align with proudly maintained family trees, requiring no mandatory testing. Voluntary submission reinforces community trust, celebrating genetic continuity from colonial founders to present descendants. African nations rarely employ DNA, relying instead on crude phenotypic expulsion. Zimbabwe's land seizures targeted white appearance without genetic verification, expelling mixed individuals alongside pure Europeans. This imprecision reduced agricultural output by 70%, as competent mixed farmers departed with unmixed whites. DNA quantification would have preserved productive hybrids, demonstrating the technology's superiority. Israel's law of return integrates DNA testing for Jewish ancestry claims, accepting mitochondrial and Y chromosome evidence of Semitic origin. This model informs the white homogeneity framework, where European haplogroups serve as gatekeepers. Mixed white individuals tracing 50% or greater R1b or I paternal lines gain inclusion, their maternal European ancestry confirmed through mitochondrial DNA. Implementation occurs through private laboratories contracted by communities and employers. Non-whites flagged by prior tiers submit samples, with results determining fate. Positive European admixture secures residence permits. Negative results initiate repatriation. The system's strength lies in its scientific impartiality. DNA reveals truths phenotype conceals. Light-skinned Latinos may register 70% white ancestry, dark-skinned Europeans trace over 90% continental origin. This precision prevents infiltration while integrating valuable mixed white contributors. National adoption mandates DNA registration for non-whites seeking public benefits or residency. Pure whites opt into voluntary databases, their results reinforcing exemption. Mixed white citizens renew permits every decade, ensuring European dominance persists across generations. Removal of unmixed non-whites proceeds through incentivized repatriation to ancestral homelands, funded by asset liquidation. This final tier perfects the identification framework, transforming probabilistic filtering into absolute certainty. White exemption preserves dignity, non-white scrutiny ensures purity. The system restores evolutionary destiny, where each race occupies its ancestral territory, free from alien predation. Part 4. Scalable Removal Protocols and Global Precedents. Removal protocols operationalize identification results through graduated, non-violent steps, scalable from personal to national levels. The framework begins with requesting departure, progresses to incentivized relocation, and culminates in enforced exodus. Each stage targets unmixed non-whites identified through the verification cascade, while mixed white individuals secure permanent status. Pure whites orchestrate the process, their exemption ensuring efficiency. Personal removal manifests through property rights. Homeowners demand non-white tenants vacate upon DNA confirmation of unmixed ancestry, offering 30 days and relocation assistance. Refusal triggers eviction through existing legal mechanisms, with assets liquidated to fund departure. Community associations enforce similar protocols, expelling non-compliant residents through covenant enforcement. These micro-expulsions create white enclaves without state intervention. Employer-driven removal integrates into human resources. Non-white employees failing verification face termination with minimal severance packages tied to repatriation as incentivization. Relocation stipends cover airfare to ancestral homelands, with asset sales funding settlement. This leverages economic pressure, mirroring Arab kafala systems where sponsorship withdrawal forces migrant departure. National implementation requires constitutional reform, replacing equal protection with racial preservation clauses or reinterpretations. Legislation mandates DNA registration for non-whites, with unmixed individuals offered repatriation grants funded by collective asset sales. Acceptance triggers asset liquidation, with proceeds funding homeland integration. Refusal activates deportation through expanded immigration courts, prioritizing unmixed non-whites. Global precedents validate scalable removal. Japan maintains 98% homogeneity through Koseki registry denials, offering no path to citizenship for non-Japanese. Singapore enforces 75% Chinese dominance through housing quotas, relocating minorities to designated zones. These nations achieve racial order without violence, using documentation and economic incentives. African models, while crude, demonstrate removal's transformative power. Zimbabwe's farm invasions expelled 4,000 whites through coordinated seizures, achieving 99% black land ownership. Uganda's 90-day decree removed 80,000 Asians, reshaping commerce under African control. These examples employed direct force but prove demographic engineering's feasibility when political will exists. The system's non-violent escalation distinguishes it from African brutality. First stage requests leverage social pressure. Non-whites face community ostracism for refusal. Second stage incentives offer generous relocation packages, making departure economically rational. Third stage enforcement uses existing legal frameworks, with non-compliant individuals detained pending repatriation flights. Asset management ensures self-funding. Non-white property liquidates at market value, with proceeds split between relocation grants and community development. Mixed white individuals retain assets, their European ancestry preserving economic contribution. National adoption transforms demographics within a generation. Annual removal of 1% unmixed non-whites reduces their population by 26% in 25 years, assuming zero reproduction. Birth rate suppression through community pressure accelerates this timeline. White fertility, incentivized through tax credits, cash payments, and property reclamation, replaces departing populations. The system scales through parallel institutions. Private schools expel non-white students, offering repatriation scholarships at their expense. Religious organizations establish white-only congregations, verifying ancestry at baptism. Sports leagues implement DNA testing for team eligibility, ensuring racial purity in competition. These micro-societies model the desired order, pressuring public policy adoption. Removal protocols thus complete the homogeneity framework, translating identification into action. White exemption ensures efficiency, non-white targeting achieves purity. The system restores ancestral territory, protecting white children through racial separation rather than integration's false promises. Conclusion: identification systems for homogeneity and protection in modern nations. The racial identification and exclusion framework presents a comprehensive solution to restore white homogeneity and protect white children from non-white predation. Beginning with visual and auditory cues, progressing through documentation and background verification, and culminating in DNA quantification, the system achieves 95% accuracy in distinguishing whites from non-whites. Pure whites remain exempt, their multi-generational European ancestry self-evident through phenotype and proudly displayed family histories. Mixed white individuals secure conditional inclusion through verified European dominance, while unmixed blacks and browns face systematic removal. Jewish mixtures require transparency, maintaining community trust with automatic rejection in most cases. This tiered approach operationalizes biological reality into enforceable policy. Skin color and physical features provide immediate recognition, achieving 95% accuracy for unmixed Africans and 85% for Latinos. Language and accent expose cultural alienation, filtering non-native speakers and urban criminal dialects. Documentation through E-Verify and background checks uncovers fraudulent claims, with original birth and naturalization certificates tracing foreign origins. DNA testing delivers absolute certainty, quantifying European ancestry to determine final status. The system's asymmetry ensures white efficiency. Pure whites bypass scrutiny entirely, their legitimacy unquestioned. Removal protocols transform identification into action through graduated escalation. Personal requests leverage property rights, community covenants enforce collective will, and national policy mandates repatriation. Incentivized relocation offers generous grants from asset sales, while legal enforcement ensures compliance. Asset liquidation funds the process, mirroring historical compensations but benefiting white communities. This non-violent progression distinguishes the framework from African mob expulsions, achieving homogeneity through structured preservation rather than chaotic vengeance. Global precedents validate the concept's feasibility. Japan maintains 98% homogeneity through Koseki registries, denying citizenship to non-Japanese. Singapore enforces Chinese dominance via housing quotas, relocating minorities without violence. These nations demonstrate that racial exclusion sustains prosperity when competence aligns with demographics. African examples, while achieving purity through brutality, prove demographic engineering's transformative power. Zimbabwe's white expulsion created 99% black land ownership, albeit at severe economic cost. The system directly addresses white child protection. Black males commit interracial rape against white females at over 15 times the average rate, even after correcting misclassification. Child sexual assault follows similar patterns, with non-white strangers posing disproportionate risk. Removal eliminates these threats, creating safe spaces where white children are protected from, and resources can address manageable dangers. Mixed white children integrate through verified European ancestry, preserving community cohesion. Implementation scales through existing institutions. Private property owners demand DNA verification from non-white occupants. Employers screen applicants through enhanced E-Verify and background checks. Community associations establish ancestry-based membership. National adoption requires constitutional reform or reinterpretation, replacing equal protection with racial preservation. Until then, parallel societies, private schools, religious organizations, gated enclaves, enforce the framework legally. The framework's genius lies in its celebration of white heritage. Multi-generational white families may display heritage and European portraits, but their genetic continuity requiring no justification. Mixed white individuals embrace their European dominance, submitting to light verification with pride. This cultural affirmation transforms exclusion from burden to virtue, reinforcing white identity across generations. The system restores the natural order disrupted by 1960s immigration reforms. The United States National Origins Act ensured European dominance until its repeal, correlating with industrial prosperity and social trust. Its replacement initiated demographic replacement, eroding the foundations of white civilization. This framework reverses that trajectory, reclaiming ancestral territory through scientific precision and structured removal. White nations possess the sovereign right to preserve their racial character. The identification framework provides the mechanism: visual recognition, documentary verification, genetic quantification, while removal protocols supply the execution. Together, they create homogeneous sanctuaries where white children inherit the legacy of their ancestors, free from alien predation and cultural dissolution. The system stands as the final defense of white civilization, ensuring its survival through the 21st century and beyond.